Hi, everyone, and welcome to Practice Growth HQ, the weekly podcast for growth-minded healthcare professionals. Now, whether you're a dentist, physio, doctor, or other healthcare professional, we talk about what's required personally and professionally to get your practice growing faster. My guest today is Pete Williams.
Then you've got transactions per client. What are you doing to get clients to come back and buy from you again? That's effectively the sixth lever. And the final one is managing your expenses and your margins. So look, when you sort of first hear those 7 areas, you go, oh yeah, none of that's sort of revolutionary or brand new. But the key thing I think that really made a difference in our business, and I've seen in so many businesses, is when you pause and you actually spend time going, what are we currently doing to drive suspects to our business? Let's list that. Let's look at that. Let's try and improve it by 10%. It might not be doing anything new. It might simply just be saying, okay, how do we make that tweak to our AdWords campaign or our SEO or whatever it might be, just to see if we can get 10% more suspects to our practice's website. Then you say, okay, well, then prospects. Once they're at our website, what are we doing on our website to get more people to engage, to book an appointment, to make an inquiry, to do things like, are you split testing? Do you have video? Are you continually thinking about your website as a living, breathing thing to say, once at our website, they're no longer, wondering who to buy from. They're now actually looking at our offering and what we actually do. So that's a different conversation with your prospects. Then obviously, how do you get them to actually turn up? Maybe a prospect is making a booking. What are you doing to make sure they actually get that bum in the seat or that buddy on the bench so you can actually do the health practitioner work that you do? And then, again, what are you doing to increase the value of what you're offering? How do you increase your prices? And then how do you get people to actually buy that extra item? And then what systems do you have in place to get them to come back and, get that extra massage a year rather than doing, 10 sessions a year? How do you get the 11th session to get that person to come back and buy again? So this is the thing that I think is really quite impactful when you take time out of your business to look at each of these areas individually and just try and aim for that 10% win. Because if you do increase each of those 7 areas by just 10%, which is not that scary and quite achievable, it actually doubles your profit, which is just phenomenal for so many businesses. And that's how you sustain real growth.
The truth is, this is my second time around in this program. The idea of having some enthusiastic students to come and check my levers, I thought, kind of why not? But I just wondered, from my dealings with them, and they interrogated me for about 90 minutes last week, and it became pretty obvious that there are sort of some levers that were a bit easier to pull than others. Now, I'm sure that's a business-to-business thing. I just wondered, ideally, 10% across all 7 to double your profits. Everyone listening likes the sound of that. But do you find that there are some levers that are sort of more commonly not optimized?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of business owners, I think so many business owners think about suspects and conversions, traffic and conversions. It's kind of like a bit of a buzzword. Everyone sort of thinks about those two things a lot. I find it very rare that a business is actually taking time to figure out what is that micro commitment people take in our business, in our practice, in our office, in our whatever it might be, to actually show intent. And then how do we encourage more of that? And how do we get more of that to happen? I think that's a big gap that people don't often think about. And also I think, again, items per sale is often people are kind of, particularly in the health space, they're very reluctant to try and drive items per sale and even transactions per client. I had this conversation with someone recently who was saying, we can't, get people to come back because, once we fix their lower back pain, they're solved. It's like, but isn't there prevention? Like, can't you be, and I know there's laws within certain things in different health areas, but there's still ways to help your client ethically and morally from a prevention perspective and say like, hey, come back again more regularly and we'll prevent this. I'm not going to try and get you to come back next week to, we've solved your back problem. So let's not come back and try and say you need another appointment to solve that back problem, whatever it might be. But let's come back and let's prevent the cavity by coming 2 times a year, not 1 time a year. There's a prevention thing here, and educating them about, hey, did you know that often your health fund will actually cover, an annual checkup? So it's not going to cost you anything. This is a good thing for you, et cetera, et cetera. And I think a lot of health practitioners are really worried about that. But I think a mind shift mindset shift is really important to go, these are areas that can make a difference in your business quite easily. And you can do stuff in a supportive way, in a non-sleazy sales way, in the way you communicate that. And I think that's the important thing, is if you take the time to say, hang on, I'm going to spend Thursday afternoon, off the tools, whatever that is for your particular industry or business, and say, okay, I'm going to figure out how could we, just in isolation, find a way to morally, ethically, and supportively get more items sold per transaction. How do we think about selling and educating our clients about, maybe we sell the electric toothbrush, maybe we sell the exercise balls or the mud for the scenario. What can we do and offer, and how can we offer it in an ethical, moral way? Done. And you try and solve that one issue, is how do we get more items sold per transaction? And then the following week you sit down with your team and you go, how do we get more transactions per client? What can we do in our system, in our process, in our communication to get clients to come back just 10% more? Not twice a year, but just 10% increase. And those sort of isolated focus times, I think, make the massive difference for businesses, because I think so many business owners, understand the need to get off the tools and work on their business, but they don't have an idea of where to focus their time when they're working on the business.
I think, look, those are great points. For someone who's worked with a range of different healthcare professionals for over 10 years now, I would say as a group that, if there's a sort of 0 to 10 spectrum of how salesy they are, most healthcare professionals are -5. And here's the problem. I am, Pete nor I are in any way advocating that you should become more salesy. Nobody wants to deal with people who are salesy, but because so many practices have gone so far the other way, what they end up doing is, I'd say, almost unethically underservicing clients. I mean, case in point, my wife has got, I've got to be careful because who knows, hopefully one of her former dentists isn't listening to this, but she needs an implant. Like, it's plain as the nose on her face. She's had a temporary crown in there for 5 years.
Wow.
And bad things happen when you do that. I've learned that working with a bunch of dentists. And I just find it interesting that it's like the balance is so far in the wrong direction that they're not, this is not doing your patients a favor. It actually would be far better for you to say, hey, look, Mrs. Pryor, I noticed that you've got this thing, would you like to hear about the options? I mean, I'll stick with dentistry for a moment because I went and saw a dentist yesterday. Do you know, Pete, I have never, I'm 53. I've lived in, I think, 20 plus houses, been to 20 plus dentists in my life. I have never, ever had a dentist ask me about ortho. I have never, ever had a dentist ask me about whitening. And I don't mean, hey, Angus, your teeth suck. You really need to do something about this, or you're going to be, the laughing stock. To say, is there anything about your smile you're unhappy with? I'm actually a pretty good healthcare professional user. I've got a close relationship with a physiotherapist and a chiropractor. And if my physio said to me, or even the chiropractor, hey, Angus, we notice we're only seeing you when you've got a problem. I'm not triathlon, but I do a lot of running. Angus, we notice we're only seeing you when, you do a problem. We would recommend that you come and do a session every ... and let's do some prevention together. I'd be like, that'd be fantastic.
Absolutely. An idea that just popped into my mind while you were talking about the dentist is, I wonder how hard would it be for a dentist to say, okay, what are the main health funds that our clients actually use, Medibank, NIB, whatever it might be here in Australia, and say, well, let's create a one-pager of what the rebates are if you have, cover on dentist work. And a client comes in and gets a teeth and go, hey, we noticed that you've swiped your card to get your rebate on the visit. Here's a list of all the other stuff that actually you can actually get a lot of savings on with Medibank Private. Were you aware of this sort of stuff? So if you ever thought about doing teeth whitening, did you know that Medibank will cover half of it? Here's a brochure on it. Yeah. It's not salesy. It's just like, I'm helping Mr. Client understand. Here's us. And like, you could do that in an afternoon. And that could be a very simple way that you get your receptionist team to say, when you swipe the Medicare card, or sorry, Medibank private card or NAB card for today's session, give them this brochure about Medibank Private and the savings they can get. And that just might be enough to go and get, 1 in 10 clients do one extra service they hadn't thought about. And that's a very simple way that you're helping the client, because you're educating them about the benefits they've got with their health fund they weren't aware of. It's not salesy, but those are the kind of things you can do when you sit down and go, hang on, how can I ethically and morally support my clients, but in a way to encourage more items per sale or more transactions per client, or whatever it might be. And I think that's the key to sort of go, these are the 7 areas that no matter what your business is, you can't deny it. These are the 7 things that drive revenue. Yep. Everything falls into one of these categories. If you're not spending time on them focused in a way, you're doing your own business a disservice, because you're kind of neglecting part of your own business.
So one of the other ones that you mentioned, and a number of the healthcare professionals listening to this will be thinking, well, how do I do this? You spoke about micro commitments. So I just, can you give us some examples of what healthcare professionals could use there?
Yeah, totally. So I think a micro commitment, this is the first thing you need to do, is basically define what that is for you. As I said before, in a car yard, a micro commitment might be taking a test drive. In a retail store, it might be trying on a pair of shoes. In a dentist scenario, it could be something like, booking an appointment. How do you make it easy for people to book an appointment? Do you have that online booking tool on your website that's very easily found? How is it positioned on the site? It's even website design to get that, if that's your definition. Maybe the way you want to define a prospect for your particular practice is maybe there's some sort of download or free report. If you're a chiropractor, it's like, how to prevent back pain for new parents, how to prevent back pain for runners. And you can have some downloads that people take off your website for free in exchange for an email address. Because that's that micro commitment, towards becoming a customer, because they want to solve a problem, but they're not quite there ready to pay for it yet. So that could be a way you could think about it from that perspective as well. Even doing things like, if you sort of nail all the basic things like retargeting on your website. Someone comes to your website, doesn't book an appointment, you can have some ads, follow them around Facebook and the internet to say, hey, got back pain, got knee pain, got wonky teeth, got tooth pain, whatever the particular health service you offer is. Those ads can actually drive people back to your website when they haven't actually booked an appointment, but they've been there in the first place. So these are some sort of things you can think about, because they've done something, they haven't quite booked or paid or turned up for the appointment. What's happening in between there and what you can do? Yeah,
unfortunately, Facebook, amongst others, does take a bit of a dim view, saying, does your teeth look like this? With a picture of a toothless man or woman. But I certainly get the concept.
New services like yours, the nitty gritty of making that happen.
Yeah. Well, but I guess I'm thinking, there must be other examples of, and I guess the key really is just to test. And sort of, what is something that would be of use to someone who's, they're not ready to go on a date with you, metaphorically, but they're, they sort of like what they see.
Totally.
Got a pretty face.
It's also, I think, the big thing is it's not always about people who aren't necessarily ready to take action. Maybe they are, but what is that step they take to show you their intent?
Yeah.
And that's the thing, in a retail, if you're an optometrist in a shopping mall, well, obviously, how do you get people to walk into the store? How can you entice more people to walk into the store to at least have a conversation with a salesperson to sort of potentially, buy those new set of frames or get an appointment to get your eyes checked? Maybe there is something you can do there, by offering, free eye checks. I don't know if that's a possibility and how that all plays out in the optometrist world, but that could be a good way to kind of, offer that some sort of, first step scenario. If people book that or take that, going to be closer to buying the set of frames, whatever it might be. So there's always something that people do to sort of show intent, but aren't quite there yet.
But I suppose coupled with that, when you're having your Thursday afternoon meeting with your team, or trusted managers or whatever the case may be, I think the other thing you probably got to keep an eye on is what's normal in the industry, because if we take that optometry example, free eye check or whatever, like if that's fairly normal in the industry, then that probably doesn't stand out, and people have seen it before and they go, well, we know that in optometry, that's just a proxy for, come and have a sales pitch.
Yep.
And it's just a matter of thinking. I'm actually reading Get Different by Mike McCallowitz at the moment. It's only just released this week. And it's almost like, what's everyone doing in your space? What's every dentist doing? What's every physio doing? And then let's see if we can find something that's a little bit normal. And one of the benefits of this podcast, dare I say, is that we should be trying to learn from each other. Like, what's normal in dentistry, can physios pinch that? I'm not saying that physios start checking people's teeth, but that it's kind of, I don't know, whatever it is. But thinking about outside your industry.
My favorite example of that is that fast food, McDonald's, KFC, which obviously is going to just make these health professionals squirm when I mention those names, but they're synonymous. I can't even say that word. They're well known for drive-throughs. I can't even say that word, but they're well known. That's the one. But they're well known for that. Do you know they actually stole that from banks?
Huh.
It's bizarre, but in America, they had drive-through banking before they had drive-through takeaway fast food. So that's you're spot on there, Angus, in terms of like, well, what can you take from other industries? Because McDonald's and KFC and Burger King and all those sort of fast food restaurants effectively leveraged the idea or stole the idea of drive-throughs from banking. Who thinks banking's revolutionary? Who's going to steal anything from the banks? Well, there's a good case in point.
Yeah, interesting. Quickly, just go through your 7 again, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So suspects, people who come and engage with a business the very first time. Prospects are the group of people who take that micro commitment towards making a purchase. In our phone system businesses, they get a quote. It's they try on a pair of shoes, they book an appointment, they take some sort of step towards buying. And obviously, the more people who take that micro commitment, the more conversions you're going to have, which is that third lever. Then you've got average item price and average items per sale. How are you getting people to buy the more deluxe offering of your service? That's average item price. But then how do you get them to buy more services when they come and interact with your business? 6, you've got transactions. What are you doing proactively? Not just relying on good customer experience, but what are you doing proactively? What systems and processes do you have in place to get people to come back and buy from you again? And then finally, how often are you spending time managing your margins and your expenses? Because that's obviously a big driver of your overall profit. So again, if you just spend time looking at each of these 7 areas, define what they are for your business, try and see what you're doing proactively to actually influence each of those, and then just try and make a 10% change in each of those areas, your business profits will double. It's not a sales gimmick or a promise. It's just mathematics, which is just the best form of evidence to rely on when it comes to, is this going to work or not?
Absolutely. Well, look, I feel like we could cover these points for hours and hours, but hopefully that's given the listeners a bit of a taste and dare I say, the next step for them, apart from perhaps getting a hold of your book, which we'll talk about in a minute, is that they actually set some time and maybe you've got to press rewind on the podcast and listen to them and think, well, which seems to me to be the most obvious of those 7 that we've not optimized, and let's spend an hour or 2 looking at those under the microscope.
Yeah, I think that's the first challenge, is just try and answer yourself, how do we define each of these and what are we currently doing? And if you can't clearly state what you're proactively doing to influence each or any of these levers, you've clearly got a gap of where you can work to make a massive impact.
Yeah, and the truth is that's part of the reason that I did this program with your students, or am doing it, because anytime they ask me something and my response started with, that's a good question, I was like, oh, okay, maybe that's an indication. Some things I could answer quickly, but other questions they'd ask, and I'm like, oh, I don't know that we really know the answer to that one. And I'm kind of going, hint, hint, for your assignment, that
exactly.
might be a good one to go
if
down.
I can answer it, you try and answer it for me. There's your project brief.
Yeah,
totally.
Absolutely.
Love it.
All right. Well, look,
Brilliant.
Really appreciate your time, Pete. So Cadence, a tale of fast business growth. Where should people get that?
Oh, look, we're all good books are sold. I think if people listen to a podcast, I would probably recommend the audiobook version. It won Audiobook of the Year about 2 years ago. The book's actually a parable. It's actually a story rather than a sort of a traditional dry business book. So it's really engaging. And the really cool thing about the audiobook is the producers actually put in some sound effects, not cheesy sound effects, but when they it's really quite interesting when you listen to the story. It's obviously read by not me, a professional voiceover artist, but it's a really engaging audiobook. So I'd say if you're a podcast listener, Audible or iTunes or wherever you get your audiobooks. Otherwise, it's available, Amazon bookstores, all the usual kind of places you find books.
Awesome. Now, if people want to reach out to you, either to be a guinea pig or just to follow you, how should they do that?
Absolutely. Yeah, look, I think, cadencebook.com is probably going to be the easiest place to remember. It talks about the book. You can go there. There's contact details on there. You can reach out. If you want to be part of the Deacon program, we're always looking for clients. If I'm doing a pitch, I'll call them clients. For the program, it's no cost, no obligation, but it's a really good way to kind of get a group of the smartest business students in the country, analysing your business, giving you a health check and helping you work through what those 7 levers are. So we're always looking for clients. PeteWilliams.com.au is another place that's probably easy to remember that you can reach out. Other than that, I've got nothing to sell you unless you want to buy a phone system or a headset.
Good man. All right. Well, look, thanks so much for your time, Pete. Really appreciate it.
Angus, thanks for having me, and hope there's some value for the listeners.
Absolutely.